first episode of lunch. Oh my god, I'm going to start crying, bro. This is incredible.
Yeah, well, I thought of it this morning. I was like, all right, well, he's on.
Love it.
What do you usually eat for lunch?
Ooh, okay. So interesting question because I do intermittent fasting. So it's like for me, it's like my window shifts depending. So it's like I don't really view my meals as like lunch, dinner, breakfast. It's like whenever I have a first meal and a last meal. And so my first meal is sometimes at like 8 and sometimes it's at like 1, depending on where my window is for the fast.
You enjoy intermittent for weight loss or for the discipline of eating?
All of the above, honestly. The weight loss, the discipline, I sleep better, I have way more energy. It forces me to really think about what I'm putting in my body, and I've done it for a while. I've done it for probably like 5-6 years now. It's been a minute.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
That's good. No, yeah. I think it forces you to have a sort of soulful experience sometimes when you can't eat for 7-8 hours at a time, right? Because everyone can just eat some chips or something, but if you're not doing it, it's discipline. It's a lot of discipline.
Yeah. I highly recommend everybody at least tries it. It's tough for the first week or two. But then after that, your body just gets used to it. And honestly, if I go back to say, if my fast isn't at least, let's say, 12 to 14 hours, I feel more sluggish. So I do a 16-hour fast, like 80-90% of the time. But I don't go below 14. I rarely go below the 14. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to, before we get into Tesla, because we're going to talk a lot of Tesla, I want to talk a little bit about your journey as a content creator just for a couple minutes because you've had a hell of a journey. Michael Wilder in the chat saying, I love his voice.
Oh, thanks, Mike.
Your voice has recently created a little bit of controversy because you've been replicating your voice using AI. And I've seen some of your videos where we can't really tell if it's you or it's the AI, but you were like, hey, what if I just replicate my voice using AI? I can get more efficient at making content, get more scripts out there. So I want you to tell me, what has it been like? Last time I talked to you was like on a channel like this I think it was like October 2022. So you were at, I think like 20,000 subs, maybe. Now you're at well over 100,000. Twitter's pushing 200,000. You're experimenting with different types of content. You have become a full-fledged media brand. You're doing this full time. What has been the journey like over the past year, and where do you see it going in the age of AI over the next couple of years?
I appreciate that question, Amit. This is why I love you, man. You're just so freaking good at this, dude. So for me, the journey has been very interesting because it transformed from a hobby to something that I actually connected with deeply, as far as making it into something that I can call my own. And that's one of the luxuries I have as a person right now, is that I have this opportunity to explore those things. And so for me, it's like, okay, how can I make my platform as useful as possible for the people that watch it? And how do I make it so that I always feel fresh as often as I can, so that I can deliver content that is up to my standard, right? And one of the things that one of the struggles with content creation, which I think few people are aware of that are not in this space, and I know you know this extremely well, is that burnout it's a legitimate thing. It's very hard to be at the top of your game all the time doing content, because number one, you're somewhat dependent on what's happening around the world. And number two, as a person, it's difficult to be on top of your game, especially with an audience, because the audience views you as somebody they watch you because they want to either be informed or feel better or be entertained. So there's the different levels of relationship that you have with your audience. And so delivering that all the time, especially if you put that pressure on yourself, it's a heavy weight. It's a very heavy weight. So for me, the experimentation is a way to keep fresh. For me, so the AI voice as an example, the way I view it is, okay, so if I can save my let's say my time in front of a camera or in front of a microphone, and instead think about the concepts, and then have an AI model of my voice read my work and sound exactly like I do, then
because
that's
reading
more
the
time.
Script means nothing. It's not creative reading a script. Coming up with the script is creative, right?
I think they're both. I think one can make the argument that reading the script is creative because, like emphasizing certain lines, emphasizing certain words. I think there's an art to what gets emphasized, but now with the AI model, we can do that. We can emphasize certain sentences. We can emphasize certain words, right? So it's almost like we're emulating what I would do with the AI voice in a way. It's like It's still me. It's just not me in front of a camera, in front of a microphone. And I understand how that can be off-putting for people. And I saw this in the comments. It's like, I've come here to watch you. I don't come here to listen to an AI, right? And I accept that feedback and I accept that criticism. But my pushback is this is where we're going anyway. In 10 to 20 years time, this is what most content will be. And so instead of getting railroaded by what's to come, I want to be in control. Right. And so this is part of that process. Is like, I want to understand what this technology will do to content creation so that I can have the reins, and instead of just this monsoon coming through, and then I'm just going to let it, just freaking toss me aside and wash me ashore. No, I'm not wired that way. I have to be in control.
Your Twitter has grown tremendously. You obviously have a decent relationship with the guy who owns the platform, Elon Musk. He follows your content, he retweets your content. You guys create content that's compelling and engaging that he likes to engage with. That's kind of the brand you're in. How have you felt over the past year on Twitter in particular with either negative feedback from Twitter people or even YouTube people and the overall growth in this sort of Tesla ecosystem with the world's richest man, actively responding to your post?
Yeah. So that one, I mean, the Elon. So I'm extremely grateful of Elon being somebody that just happens to engage with my content. Of course, it would be silly for me to say, yeah, Elon has no impact on the performance of my content. That's insane. The guy has a giant following, and the fact that he interacts with my content exposes that content to way more people than if he didn't. Right. The guiding principle that I have to constantly ensure that I'm holding to is that I'm not making content for someone else, that I'm making content for me. Right. And that's and I think thus far I'm doing a good job, and I just have to make sure I keep doing that, because it's very easy for that dynamic to lead you astray. Because I can see, I'm not going to name any names, but I think you can see how if you tailor yourself to be maximally engaged by people that have large followings, you can dramatically boost your engagement on Twitter. Right. But then over time you get found out. And so I think that's just not a game that I'm interested in. But because of that growth, it comes with hate, of course. And I view it as a giant compliment that I am, quote unquote, important enough that are people out there that want to take the time out of their day to let me know how much they don't like me.
Right.
It's flattering. It's flattering. It really is.
Well, I mean,
matter. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, like I think you realize, like, as you get older, you get a lot of as you grow, you start to get a lot of people that have thoughts and opinions about everything you do. But you're also welcoming a baby soon into your life. So does that also make you think that, like, dude, why do I care about what this random person is saying when I have a whole other life to worry about?
100%. You nailed it. I mean, it really has. It's weird how, like, the universe gets things to align for you in a way. It's like if you just, like, allow yourself to let life, like, dictate you to where to go and just really follow your instincts and follow your gut, it's crazy how some things start to, like, fall into place. And so the growth of my platform, with my wife being now 7 months pregnant, we have a baby coming May.
You have a name for the baby yet, or no?
We do, but we're going to keep it secret.
No, you should keep it secret. I'm just curious if you had a name or not.
Yeah. It's a boy. It's a boy. So, I love it. Yeah. When I think about him, I'm like, okay, what matters? What really matters in this world, right? What's really the stuff that really matters? And so the stuff that really matters to me is being surrounded by people that I love, being surrounded by people that love me, helping to build a future that I can be proud of being a part of. Which is why I enjoy this content creation thing so much, because I feel like I can actually help move us to a good direction in very, very, very small way, but I still feel like I can. And then as far as a child goes, it's like there's nothing more important to me than growing humans that will be a positive for society in the future, along with my wife. And so everything else just kind of becomes, like, it's just everything else becomes what it is, right? And then when you're thinking about, okay, so what does it make sense for me to spend time thinking about what this person said, when they said something negative about me, or should I really spend time on making content that people are gonna find valuable and entertaining? And I'm like, of course, the first one is useless. Like, why would I do that? And if, and sometimes I'll troll. Sometimes I'll see a comment out there. It's like, blah blah blah. Here you go. You're gonna shoot a little thing to me. 2 seconds. Here's a little troll back, and you move on, right? But yeah, it used to impact me more in the past, but the more you see it, the more you see how repetitive it is. It's the same four things that are usually said by the same people, you know? And after a while, you're like, okay, like at least come up with something new, you know? So after a while, that gets found out too. And that's been one of the like benefits of having a platform as well, is that you see that even when you get hate on platforms, if you're somebody in the audience that's thinking about doing content creation and you're sort of hesitant because you're worried about what other people might say or think about what you do, you'll quickly find out that those numbers are in such a giant minority that they're insignificant and they are extremely predictable after a little while. And at some point you go from like saying, oh, I can't believe what this person said about me, to, is this person okay? Like what? Right. Why are they doing this? You know, like something must not be. They must not be fulfilled, and they're using you as a punching bag. And
yeah,
I'm
like I
what
say,
can I do?
My skin is so thick. If you saw it at a club, you would ask for its number. I mean, that's kind of the way that I conceptualize having a thick skin. So, all right, Tesla. Let's get into it,
dude,
bro.
That was a 10 out of 10. I love that.
Just my audience is so annoyed because
Oh
I've used
my
that line
God.
like 30 times, and so they're like, "Oh, Amit with this stupid line again." But it's a
Please
good
don't
line.
stop using that line.
It's a great line, dude. I wish you could. Please, audience here, Farzad, say that again. Please don't stop using that line. It's a good line, we can admit. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff to talk about Tesla. Here's my first question.
Yeah,
Elon has, to me, in the past, let's say 3 months post Q3, basically started tweeting even more about his political beliefs. Immigration is a big topic. Gender is a big topic. He's just tweeting a lot. And you've got the Gary Blacks of the world that think that it's ruining the stock. You've got the Ross Gerbers of the world that thinks that he needs to, someone needs to take his phone away. I mean, literally, they verbatim said this stuff. What are your thoughts on Elon's political tweets? He's one of the most outspoken CEOs. And do you actually think what Gary Black thinks, which is that the stock is down about 30% over the past 5 months because of Elon's tweeting?
That's a great question, and I think it's nuanced. And I actually made a video about this on my channel. The title was "How Elon Musk Disrupted Himself." That was like the concept. And so let me answer your last question. Do I think him being more outspoken and political on X, is it hurting the stock price? I have no freaking idea. I don't know. The stock markets, to me, trying to figure out what the stock market does in the short to medium term has been a losing battle since I've started investing in the stock market back in 2012.
Right.
And anytime I try to make sense of it, I just can't. And I think it's because in the short to medium term, the forces that dictate what a stock price is are not correlated to the long-term potential of said company, especially if you're viewing it through that lens. And you can't. And when I sit down, I'm like, what happened to the stock today? I literally don't know how to even ask that question, because the variables at play for day-to-day movements it doesn't matter what the long-term potential of the company is. Unless Elon, God forbid, leaves or something happens to him, then I'm like, okay, yeah, something fundamental changed about the company. But outside of that, I don't know. I don't view him being political on X as a fundamental change to Elon. And let me explain why. So if you think about back in when Tesla was founded, all right, what was the core mission of the company? Is to accelerate the company, it's accelerate the avenue of sustainable transport, because we are running into an issue with carbon emissions and fossil fuels, and we need to start using electric vehicles and renewable energy to move away from fossil fuels.
Correct.
Who didn't like that messaging? Right?
If you didn't believe in climate change, maybe, but everyone else believed in it, right?
The same group that is super on board with him with what he's saying about free speech and immigration traditionally would have and did absolutely hate his message when it comes to Tesla. Right? It's just now the existential nature of what he thinks is happening with civilization, right? Like if you just follow the arcs of his companies, Tesla was preventing civilization from dying from ourselves. We need to make sure we're not putting too much carbon in the atmosphere. SpaceX, preventing civilization from dying by meteors, nuclear warfare, freaking, again, insane climate change. Maybe something happens and we need to leave the Earth. Okay, so it's an insurance policy. He openly called it insurance policy. Now, X, right or wrong, right? I'm not saying these are right or wrong processes. This is just how historically, I believe Elon approaches things. And if you read Walter Isaacson's book, The Biography, I think it speaks to this as well. Now with X, he believes, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, he believes that what is happening with free speech as of late is cause for concern, and there is not enough of a counterbalance to prevent that thing from going too far, which is silencing people, social media companies having way too much power to hide information that is actually important for the public. We all see what happened during COVID. I'm not saying it was super terrible, but there were things that were very concerning, and there was no counterbalance to that. There was not, and anytime there tried to be a counterbalance, media corporations had a outsized influence to dictate what the public had access or not have access to. And if you accelerate that over time, then you're going to have an issue where potentially you could end up with very few people that dictate what the public can and can't see. That's how I think he's thinking about it. And so from that context, when you have X and you need to ensure that people are comfortable being able to voice their concerns because you believe that's been happening, if you think about how Elon has approached Tesla and SpaceX in the past, he always leads from the front. So at Tesla, he's the guy sleeping at the factory. At SpaceX, he's the guy with the engineers designing the rockets and the boosters. With X, if it's the free speech platform, the leader should probably exercise his free speech, right? So from that standpoint, I don't think it's really that different. It's just, it's now become emotionally charged because politics by default is not a science-based thing. It's just how people feel about a subject. It becomes very tough to actually sit down and do the math on what's going on. And his traditional base that has followed him for so long with Tesla, especially, now they're hearing this rhetoric, let's say, that is a 180-degree difference from what they've traditionally liked Elon for. And those people, in my opinion, are extremely uncomfortable, and they are maybe just not, they're just very uncomfortable. That's my thesis. That's my thesis of what's happening now.
It speaks to the nuance of humanity, right? Because if you're in 2017, if you looked up to Elon Musk because he's trying to stop the world from climate change, right? And you're like, I can get behind that. You might be generally liberal, moderately liberal, and you know that a lot of people can get around to that. Now he's saying things about gender, saying things about free speech, and you fundamentally disagree with him. It really challenges you as a human being. Because can I agree with someone's overarching mission that has created billions of dollars of prosperity, and that is the single reason EVs even exist and there's any momentum behind them? But I can also disagree with some of their political beliefs on immigration. And if I think we're getting to the point where you as a human cannot reconcile those two conflicts in your mind, then we're in a really dangerous spot in humanity. I think that's what Elon's trying to point out, right?
I agree 100%. So I'm right there with you. And I believe the giant majority of the population feels that way. It's just that for some reason, media houses of the present over the course of time have had outsized influence in pushing their narrative that is counter to what you just described, which is like, believe what we say, because division works for some reason in the traditional sense of like media and how, advertisers are able to monetize on content. When you try to harvest division, you typically have been able to maximize viewership because you're creating some sort of artificial fear, and humans respond to fear much more than they respond to positivity, because our DNA is designed to watch out for things that might kill us. Right. So our psychology and biology has been hacked by media. It really has, for the last probably 100 years, honestly. And it's been a long, long time, in my opinion. So, but I agree 100%. And I think most people think that way. So when I hear things like, oh, Elon should shut up because Tesla stock is going to go down and people are not going to buy Teslas, my response to that, if that's the case, if people are not really going to buy Teslas, how come in the year that Elon was the most vocal, the best-selling car in the world by 20%, was twice as expensive as the number 2 spot, was an electric vehicle, okay, was barely marketed or advertised, and it sold in a fraction of the markets than the second runner-up? Somebody explain that to me. And nobody has been able to. And the reason why is because people thinking that this is a problem live in a bubble. They live in a bubble.
I would agree. And I think when I was in 2015, I wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders, and I was like, and you grow and you realize, well, things are, maybe I don't want to tax the rich as much as I used to in the past. And like, you evolve. And I think you're speaking to the right point, that when you've been sort of absorbed by legacy media corporations, it's hard to kind of think out of that bubble. I want to get your thoughts on this, and this will transition us into an entire conversation on Rivian. But Mr. Gary Black tweeted this, and I was very interested in what he said. This was on Friday. It won't go well with big institutions if Elon's 2024 compensation plan reflects a market cap trench based on today's depressed Tesla stock price. I think this was at when it was 192, which was largely self-inflicted. It's not lost on anyone that when Elon starts trash talking about Rivian potentially going bankrupt in 6 quarters despite having $9.4 billion in cash, that this is bad for the company, and then Tesla stock falls. Basically making the argument that Tesla stock was down at 194 on Friday because Elon was tweeting that Rivian might go bankrupt. Rivian is an EV competitor, and Gary Black's logical syllogism here is that if Rivian goes bankrupt and they're an EV company, and Elon's tweeting about the competition in a negative way, then the entire market is going to say that, well, Tesla one day might not do as well, because if Rivian doesn't do well for some reason, Tesla doesn't do well either. This argument made no sense to me. I didn't understand it. I thought it was a reach of a reach, and I've defended Gary Black in the past to like bring objectivity to the Tesla community, but this to me seemed very weird. And then I found out he actually bought a ton of Rivian last quarter. What are your thoughts on his perspective on Rivian, and then your overall thoughts on Rivian's quarter? And do you think these guys survive?
Yeah, I really respect Gary, even when he says things like that, where I'm reading it with you and I'm like, what are you even saying, bro? Like, it doesn't.
I was just like, I have no idea what
I don't know. Yeah. And listen, Gary, I love that man. He's allowed to be wrong. We'll give him a little bit of grace. You're allowed to be wrong, Gary. It's okay, But yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think, especially because what Elon said is true. It's true. He speaks from experience, y'all.
The company almost went bankrupt like 17 times.
Yeah, right? It's a factual statement, what he said, right? And so if big institutionals are selling the stock because their feelings are hurt by Elon telling the truth, then I think that says more about institutional investors than the stock. So that's the way I view it. And then my secondary point is, who cares about the long-term potential of Tesla? This has nothing to do with the long-term potential of Tesla. And again, so when I look at short-term movements, I'm like, I don't even know how this is even relevant, right?
Right.
So the more important question is, okay, what's happening with Rivian? So Rivian is a perfect use case, and Lucid for that matter, that even though you can have excellent products, I believe Lucid and Rivian both have excellent products. I see them often, especially Rivians. I'm starting to see a lot more of them around my area. They're sick cars. Their owners love them. They have great performance. But if you have a company that's not able to generate a profit over the long term, you don't have a business. You just don't have a business. And the big dichotomy between Rivian and Tesla, in my opinion, is that if you look at the past of the two companies, Tesla was able to achieve profitability with limited scale.
Yep.
So, and they proved that with the S and the X before they got into the Model 3. Rivian has not proved that at all. They haven't even gotten close to being profitable with either the R1T or the R1S, right? And that may have been by design. I don't know why, but maybe let's give them the benefit of the doubt. It's like, well, we're just waiting for the R2 platform to come in, which is going to be our cheaper car. That's great. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at Rivian's 2024, they got it to basically no growth. Mm-hmm. And they're still about, $40,000 away from achieving profitability. They're about... Yeah.
The stat that I saw was they spent $1.4 billion on OpEx to produce 14,000 cars. Tesla spent $2.4 billion and they produced 400,000 cars, right? Yeah. So it's like the delta between how much they're spending versus the output is just it's all a question of vertical integration that Tesla's figured out that Rivian just has not at all.
But the OpEx is a function of economies of scale, right?
Correct.
So like for Rivian to be able to, so Rivian needs to grow into that 1.4. Right, but the problem is they're not guiding for growth this quarter for this year. That's my overarching point. Mm-hmm. It's that so they're guiding for positive gross profit for in a year where they're not going to grow, and the only way really to dramatically lower your costs in manufacturing is through scale. So if you're not going to scale in this year, how are you going to cut costs? I don't understand that math, right? So maybe there is like huge, maybe they are forecasting huge. Decreases in COGS Maybe they're saying lithium's come down tremendously, raw materials have come down tremendously, the labor force has stabilized. We're gonna 10% layoff. We're gonna do manufacturing efficiency processes and all that stuff. So maybe through there they can get to positive gross profit. But that also implies that their competition, if this is what they're banking on, which is the raw materials and all that stuff coming down, well, guess what? Tesla's going to have the same exact thing.
Right.
And Lucid's going to have the same exact thing. And BYD is going to have the same exact thing, right? So now you're going to be competing in an area where maybe you can get to profitability, but then your competition is going to get there as well. So now it's like the dynamic doesn't change. So now Rivian has to survive through product superiority, right? Which is, I think that's where I'll give it to them. I think they can actually make it. So in my opinion, I think Rivian actually has a bright future if they can make it to R2 and R2 gets them profitable. But those are giant ifs.
Now, here's the thing.
Those are very big ifs.
You just did the math, and people forget 342 people here. Farzad is a math major, so he's a big old nerd from college. He actually majored in math. You did the math. That made a lot of sense. And your fundamental conclusion after doing all the math was if XYZ happens for Rivian, it also happens for Tesla and Lucid, which means product velocity is the core differentiator in terms of them actually being able to grow. And then I think it's just a subjective conclusion at that point. Well, everyone or a lot of people think Tesla has the better product, so then Tesla's probably going to grow. If you can do that math that quickly and come to that conclusion, why did Gary Black buy so much Rivian? Like, why are some of these people buying so much of that versus just buying more Tesla if they know the inevitability of how this works out?
I don't know how to answer that question. I have no idea. Because I don't know what the justification is. Maybe
I guess my point I'm trying to make here is, do you think they have an ideological bias now against Elon the person? Because it can't be Tesla versus Rivian. Because the math you said made a lot of sense. Like, the math does not go in Rivian's favor. So the only reason I would imagine to take a position in Rivian would be because of Elon.
I don't know. I mean, I hope that's not the case, because that is contra to how someone like Gary approaches investing, which is very math based, or at least that's the way that he has a fund, he has a product and a service that he sells. More power to him. But yeah, so they thought Rivian would grow. So maybe that's his justification. But after Rivian came out and said we're probably not going to grow in 2024, then one would think that he would sell the stock. Right. One would think. But maybe there's something else there that we don't understand as well as he does. For me, it's impossible for me. And again, I am somebody who's biased in favor of Tesla, because I feel like they have by far the best prospects from dominating the transportation industry for the next 20 years. And so for me, Rivian is just a small player in that TAM, right? For me, it's like the way I view the long-term auto industry, and we're seeing so many of these signs, especially with Apple now canceling their EV plans, which I think is a giant piece of news. It's looking like a world that's going to be very similar to what the smartphone world looks today, which you have a dominant player with lion's share of the profits, a dominant player with a lion's share of the units, and then everybody else. Right? So you have Apple with basically all the profits, and then you have the Android platform with players like Samsung and others with a lion's share of the units, with most number of smartphones. And then you have these little players that kind of try to get in, and they try to take a little bit of the market share. But the market share is dominated by Apple and players like Samsung. On the auto side, I think it's going to be very similar. So it's going to be Tesla dominating the lion's share of the profits, and you're going to have players like BYD and others that are going to dominate the lion's share of the units. And so for me, Lucid, I don't know where they fall in that, because they haven't proven profits and they haven't proven units.
Right.
Tesla has proven profits and units. BYD is proving units, but they haven't proven profits. And then Tesla, in my opinion, has a one-up with their approach to software and artificial intelligence and self-driving technology that really will allow them to be the only self-driving provider at scale, because they decided to go with a hardware suite that is $1,000 to $2,000 versus players like Waymo, Baidu, and Zoox, where their technology for self-driving is extremely expensive, And B is extremely labor intensive because they haven't had the luxury of offloading their workflow to an artificial intelligence that learns how to drive. Instead, you have a bunch of human people that have to map the streets and sit down and write code telling a car to avoid this cone at this intersection. And the second that changes, that car can't go through that intersection until it gets remapped.
Real quick, let's get your thoughts on Apple, then we'll move on. So they canceled their EV plans yesterday, Bloomberg reported. Seems like it is official now. 10 years, Dan Ives said they probably spent close to 10 to 20 billion developing this. Do you think they kind of had to do this? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, ask that question
do you think they had to do this? Or do you think they even had a chance to go up against Tesla here?
I'm sad that they canceled because I think, especially after trying Vision Pro, because two different product categories, but I think the overarching thought process here is like, what is technology? Technology is a creation by humans that, like, especially innovative technology. It's a creation by humans that dared to try something that everybody else thought was either batshit crazy or impossible. That's what innovation is at its core, right? So the fact that Apple's like, EV too hard or EV too expensive or EV doesn't make sense, to me is like, damn it, guys, come on. We need more companies that are willing to risk, especially when you have a war chest of cash.
200 billion
supposedly,
of cash.
Dude, it's crazy. And talent and the brand and the cachet and the ecosystem, right? So like, why not get into it? So I think the conclusion here is that Apple, I think it's quite obvious here. Apple only gets into stuff where they feel like they can win. Right? They want to be the winner of that space. Right. But they don't think they can win an EV. And why is that? And my gut tells me is that it's because you have players like Tesla and BYD that just have an edge when it comes to innovation, drive, culture, approach, and willing to do the thing that most people hate, which is go through pain to ensure that a car company actually stays alive. And Apple is like, we're not going to do that. And that's okay. They have every right to do that. And I applaud them for realizing that they're not going to get into it. It could also be MKG's point from yesterday, MKBHD, is that, maybe they realize that it's much easier for them to get into it through software than hardware and just become like a ecosystem provider to all the other players not named Tesla. We'll do the car OS, and then we'll let everybody else handle the hard piece, which is actually building the freaking car, right? So maybe that's their approach moving forward, which makes more sense for them if they don't think they can get into the car itself. But cars are going to become very commoditized. I mean, I don't even call them cars anymore. I think they're just transportation units moving forward. They're just transportation units because, with the advent of self-driving, you just have a room on four wheels that is customized to your need. And then you're going to have fleet providers that offer products that are tailored to that need. It's very similar to like the airplane model, like the airfare model, where you have Boeing and Airbus, they build the planes, but then you got Virgin and Spirit and United and Delta and Southwest and all these other players, Alaska, all these other guys. They figure out how to tailor that thing to their customer base, and that's where I think cars are going. Because
this transitions us really well to FSD. I think Apple also realized if they don't have the data advantage, they don't have the autonomy advantage, they're not going to put out a car that's like not as good as they're not going to put out the number 2 player on the block. I mean, even against the Meta Quest, I mean, Meta Quest is cool, but spatial computing on the Vision Pro is a whole different experience. I mean, the only reason it's going viral, and I know you tried it, is because of Apple. So if they were not going to be number 1 in this space, which clearly they just weren't if they didn't have the data advantage, then I think it made sense to switch to generative AI for their main focuses, which goes to FSD. FSD 12 point something is out. It's getting to a lot of different people, and people are using it. They're seeing that it's way more effective than the previous versions based on the new way that they've started to build this thing. When do you think it's coming out and we're getting to that fleet of robotaxis? I know it's a very basic question, but I mean, if that does happen, the stock can go 5-10x pretty easily. How do you think the timeline is on that?
So it's dependent on Tesla actually completing the damn thing. How many years have we been waiting for this?
I made a video called 2024 is the year for Tesla to shut up or put up on FSD, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So talk to me about that. Why'd you say that?
Because V12, how they're so the way I view the space is if you want self-driving cars at scale, V12 has to be the way. It's because essentially what Tesla has done, they figured out a way to have a limited amount of hardware actually work and be able to do self-driving. And the way to do that is by offloading the work of the code, of actually coding the thing to an artificial intelligence to figure out how to actually make it drive. Yep. So after that, I don't know what else you can do to make the 8 cameras work, right? But that's like the maniacal approach of Elon, which is like, this is physically possible. We're going to figure out a way to make it work. And everybody else brute forced it with LiDAR, ultrasonics, radar, sonar, freaking all the DARs, right? Just pick a DAR and they probably have it in the car. But he said, that's crazy, unsustainable, impossible to scale, way too expensive. We won't even be able to offer fares that are less than an actual Uber today because of how expensive the technology is and how likely it is for it to break. The more sensors you have, the more complications you have. We have to go with cameras because we drive with 2 cameras and a freaking, and a gimbal with our neck. So we can do that. So we just need to figure out how to make it do that. And they figured it out, I think, with this V12. And how did they do that? They had the 8 cameras and just put the brain in the AI. And the AI just figures out how to drive, right? So the initial results from V12 for me, I haven't had hands-on yet, but I know some folks that have it locally that have been absolutely raving about the software. We have videos from AI Driver. Make sure you go follow him, AI Driver on YouTube. He has a V12 video. I think it's gotten 300,000 views already. It shows the leap that we've had now in self-driving technology using cameras and an AI computer to where 1 year of development with the least amount of data they'll have and the least amount of compute hardware they'll have, the car already performs significantly better than the previous version in almost all situations, to the point where in a lot of use cases, it feels just as comfortable as a Waymo, right? And the Waymo has figured out how to do that with way more hardware and way more human input, and also with way more cost, right? So that's the fundamental breakthrough. So I think as long as the trajectory continues for the rest of the year, I feel I've been making these predictions every year and be wrong, Amit. So I'm going to make another one and be hopefully right this time. I think they'll have their ChatGPT moment in 2024. So I think what they'll have is they'll have a software that they'll release to the fleet that will drive just as good as anybody on the road. They'll have a free trial. It's going to go viral. People are going to lose their minds. And then in 2025, we'll start seeing this thing operate as robotaxi in certain cities around the country.
Okay, so it wouldn't be a global type of approach. You think it would be kind of city by city. The regulators would. The
regulatory will totally, but I think that the forcing function will be cost. The forcing function will be cost.
What do you mean by
why do I say the thing that's going to force jurisdictions to bring the technology on board? So why do I say that? So one of the things that allows economies to work is for people to be able to go to work, and a lot of people. It's expensive. Gas is expensive. Owning a car is expensive. A lot of people have to resort to public transportation. A lot of people have to resort to carpooling, right? What Tesla has achieved with this technology, if they're successful, is that they can offer a transportation unit from point A to point B that's going to be a fraction of the cost of a traditional transportation unit today. If you just go buy, lease a Toyota Corolla and pay gas, right? And the reason why is because the most expensive variable is now being removed, which is the driver. And the cost of that car versus the existing cost of a gas car today is the same. And that's why Waymo and others don't work long term. It's because their cars are 10 to 20x more expensive than what somebody's using today. So when you go hail a Waymo, it's the same cost as an Uber. Whereas Tesla, because they've been able to remove 80% of the cost with the driver, they can now say, well, guess what? Instead of paying $80 to go to the airport, it's $15 because there's no driver involved.
Right.
And once you have that, you're going to have jurisdictions like, okay, that's going to open up our economy because we're going to have people, it's going to be the friction to get people to work is going to come down. So it's in their best interest to bring that technology on board, not to even mention safety. If Tesla can prove that this thing's significantly safer than a human and completely removes drunk driving out of the equation, and it's way cheaper to operate than an Uber, then all of a sudden your downtowns are going to be filled with self-driving cars with people going out and never having to worry about getting into a crash. And they're going to be doing it at a fraction of the cost of an Uber. stuff like that is gonna, I think the regulatory will follow suit quickly. It's just Tesla has to prove the safety and Tesla has to prove the cost advantage. And I think they will.
And you think it's good for people to not have to own a car anymore?
I don't know if it's good or bad. I think that's what's going to happen. The wallet speaks in the end. And I think that's what's going to drive the adoption.
In general, though, you would imagine that if people don't have to worry about like actually owning a car and they could just have this kind of service that picks them up whenever they want, that would be more economical and that would open a lot more opportunities for people to like.
I think so.
Do things in life, right?
I think so. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have to remember that half of America lives paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Like we forget about that when we talk about technologies like these. And this is this is where, again, when I hear people saying like Tesla needs to watch their gross margins, they have to advertise. I'm like, no, guys, they have to lower their costs so that they can get their cars everywhere, so they can collect the data and offer self-driving cars that will have entertainment on board where they can monetize. That is Tesla's long-term profitability, not 2 points of gross margin in the short term.
Okay, so real quick on this one, did the advertising debate. I mean, I actually don't know your opinion on this. Do you care if they advertise, or do you think it's the right discussion to be having?
Traditionally, so I've been on the camp very vocally before where I felt like advertising was not needed because number one, the Model Y, best-selling car in the world, 1.2 million, 20% more than the Corolla, twice the price, EV only, fraction of the markets, right? Okay, cool. But now the conversation becomes, okay, there are a lot of people out there that are not aware that this car is way cheaper than the other cars, right? And that's where I'll concede. I'll be like, okay, you're right. There are people out there that are buying RAV4s and Camrys and Corollas and Kia Souls and Hyundai Elantras and Hyundai Sonatas and Volkswagen Golfs and so on and so forth, where they could buy a Model 3 on lease or a Model 3 with the EV tax credit, and they will pay the same out of pocket monthly, right? But they don't know that, or they're not comfortable with that technology yet. So from that perspective, yeah, I think it makes sense. It benefits the mission if you get more people on board that this technology is it. But unless the technology is affordable, right, it's not going to be purchased. You'll slowly make inroads with people that are hesitant. But ultimately, the thing that's really going to maximize people buying Teslas, in my opinion, is seeing them on the road or where they live and having somebody they know and trust, getting their butt in their seat, experiencing it for the first time and being like, holy crap, I had no freaking idea. That's what's going to sell the car in the long term. And getting it to a point where people can actually afford it. So for me, it's like, yeah, it's a variable that Tesla should consider, but long term, the cost variable, in my opinion, is significantly more important, to the point where it's like, okay, it's just up to Tesla. If they don't advertise, I don't care. If they advertise, great.
This is one of the reasons I listen to you about Tesla against a lot of other people that talk about it, because you make such a sound argument that's just like, look, let's actually look at this company from a fundamental perspective and on the long term and what their growth horizons are. And then you've got the people on Twitter, like Gary Blacks of the world, that are like, why aren't we pumping 17,000 ads on YouTube or Google or on CNBC and buying that media? And when you speak about it, you're like, that doesn't move the needle. Maybe it sells incremental more amounts of cars, but what moves the needle is when Kim Kardashian's at Starbucks in a Cybertruck and the entire world is like, what is that? I mean, while
Elon is super vocal, right? And she's not paid to buy that car.
And people pay Kim Kardashian hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars to like just do an Instagram post, but the product is selling itself. My sister, I asked her the other day, oh, what do you think of Apple's Vision Pro? She was like, what's that? She had no idea. As you said, we in this community, finance, tech, we forget that the rest of the world has jobs, and she works in a school.
They're normal. We're crazy.
We're crazy analyzing the fucking specs. And I think you wrote like a 17 long page thesis on Twitter about your Vision Pro. You're turning into Bill Ackman a little bit right now.
I'm coming for you, Bill.
but she didn't care about the Vision Pro. She probably doesn't even know what a Cybertruck is. But if she sees it, she would be kind of interested. So your perspective on Tesla really is the product will eventually sell itself and we figure out the cost of goods and all that stuff. And that's sort of the growth trajectory, not how many, ads can we buy on Facebook to sell it.
100%. I think, but listen, I'm not going to say like it's not a valid argument short term. I think it's a valid argument short term, but I'm not focused on the short term. What I'm focused on is how can Tesla get to 20 million units per year where they can drive themselves at a fraction of the cost of everybody else. and leveraging that same exact technology to have a humanoid robot that's going to disrupt labor and do the same exact thing to physical labor. That is Tesla's long term.
We'll talk about robots in a second. I want to get this question before robots. Q3 earnings didn't give any guidance on the margins, didn't give any guidance on the volume. They did say our rate of growth on the volume will be significantly lower than it was last year.
Q4 earnings.
Oh, sorry, Q4, yeah.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the earnings? What were your thoughts on the call? Dan Ives said Elon was acting like a child. I mean, like, how did you feel about the call and the actual numbers themselves?
It was a call that's traditional for Tesla. Go back and listen to go back to 2017, 2018 and listen to the calls from back then when it had 40% short interest and Elon was not sleeping and working at the factory. That was entertaining. Those calls were entertaining. So it's like people forget. I think people are trying to force a normal lens at a company that's not normal. They're trying to make Tesla into something that it is not. And as long as Elon is the leader, Tesla will not be a normal company, which means that sometimes they're going to do things that people are going to raise an eyebrow and be like, what the hell? What just happened? Like, why would he say that? Like, I don't understand why he went on this tangent, or why is he bringing up, civilizational, collapse while he's talking about Tesla. It's like, well, that's just how the dude thinks. The reason why Tesla exists is because you have a dude that thinks that way. Tesla doesn't exist without a dude that thinks that way, because it's by default, it had to be an existential effort for that company to survive and be successful, especially in a market where nobody else has done it before. And the supply chain didn't exist because Tesla and some Chinese players built the supply chain for it to actually be where it's at today. Right. So for me, the call is just par for the course. Gross margins were up for the cars, which everybody seemed to miss. And because the stock was down, this is where short-term and medium-term stock price movements drive me insane. The rhetoric was the reason why Tesla stock is down is because gross profits are down on the cars. And then Tesla gets on the call and they say, guess what? Look at this. Our profits are up. Okay. And for the rest of the year, we think costs are going to continue to come down. And then what does the stock do? It goes down. Mm-hmm. Right. And then now the new rhetoric is what? They're going to stop. They're not going to grow as much in 2024 because, they said they're not going to sell as much. They gave no guidance. And that's why the stock is down. I'm like, okay, so which one is it? Right. So just pick a lane, pick a lane. Well, and they'll say, well, things have changed. I'm like, okay, cool. Things have changed. Have you thought about what's in the product pipeline? Have you thought about what they're working on as far as how they're going to monetize artificial intelligence, how they're going to have a fleet of robots that's going to collect data for their self-driving software to where they're going to be able to offer this thing across the globe? Are you thinking about that? And of course, for the short term and medium term, by default, they're not thinking about that because people are trying to guess what Tesla's going to do next week. That's not interesting to me.
Right.
That exercise doesn't make any sense. So for me, the calls are more about, honestly, it's more about making sure that the long-term prospects of the company are intact.
Right. And
these are full self-driving, high unit growth, things like the compact car, things like the bot. That's what I'm interested in. And some people will say, well, you just have a lot of hopium, and that's what you're invested in the company. I'm like, no, I've just identified what I believe to be a company that has a unique set of circumstances, and it has a track record of history, a track record of executing against very ambitious goals and completely upending industries by innovating. And that formula seems to be completely 100% alive. If anything, probably better than ever, because they've been able to do things like the Cybertruck, which is getting really good reviews and people are very impressed by. They've been able to come out with the Model 3 refresh, which many people are calling the best value for money, period, for an electric vehicle, on a chassis and a process that is 7 years old. So they've been able to redo that and make it that. They have a self-driving system that's able to drive itself as good as a Waymo in the span of a year with a fraction of the cost and the pieces than a Waymo car has. That's what I'm interested in. That's the thing that gets me. I'm gonna be nice. I was gonna say something rude, so I'm just gonna be quiet. That's the stuff that I'm interested in. And some people will be like, well, but you can't sit down and do the math on that. I'm like, yeah, by default, a novel problem, you will not be able to do math for it. So the variables to solve for novel problems are culture, leadership, execution.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think everyone who's a long-term investor at some point is betting on hopium. Like you're doing calculated hopium, but you are hoping that you wake up 10 years from now and your stock.
It's so hypocritical. It's so hypocritical when I hear that. It's fucking crazy. Oh, I cursed. Sorry.
There you go. That's all right. Jeff agrees with you right on, Farzad.
Sorry.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. 474 people. Got about 10, 15 minutes left. I want to ask Farzad about this question. This is turning me into, I think, even a bigger bull than you on Tesla, Farzad.
Oh,
this news right here.
How's that even possible?
So this is the news that broke, and it's getting me more excited than I can ever imagine about the history or the future of Tesla, which is that Jeff Bezos, Nvidia, OpenAI, Microsoft, Intel, Samsung, and Amazon, talk about an all-star list of investors, have invested $675 million in a pre-money valuation worth $2 billion for Figure.ai. Now, the reason this is really interesting is because this company does no revenue. This company is less than 2 years old. This company somehow convinced the biggest investors in the world, Jeff Bezos, put in $100 million himself, to invest in their startup. Jensen Huang, on an interview with Wired Magazine the other day, said, we did AI with text, we did AI with video. The next logical conclusion for AI should be robotics. A day after the news came out, which was last Thursday, Tesla put out their video of the Optimus bot, or like a new updated video of the Optimus like walking in the factory. And I don't think they put it out on coincidence. I think they saw the crazy media coverage that this two-year-old dinky little startup got for building a robot. And Tesla was like, hey guys, we were the ones who even started this whole Optimus bot thing in the first place. The reason I've been getting bullish about it is because the global GDP for the workforce is 100 trillion. Half of that is the TAM for these robotics companies, which is 50 trillion. It is the greatest TAM in the history of the universe. And everyone's so concerned about when the robot's going to come to your house. The robot's not going to come to your house maybe for 10, 15 years, but in the factories next year, BMW, which Figures has a deal with, all these other companies could potentially use these robots and really start to see a lot of momentum in regards to robotics. So the question to you is, what do you think about Figure? What do you think about Figure getting this funding and how it implicates Optimus? And then do you think Optimus is going to be bigger than the car business long term?
I'm not super familiar with Figure because they are a startup, right? But what's interesting is that you have money being thrown at the problem, right? And so now you have more than just one player, which came out in, I think 2020 was when they unveiled the dancing robot, when they had the person in the suit. But they're like, hey, the next logical thing for us to do was to get into spatial compute or robotics, because now we have the underpinnings to make a humanoid robot, right? And then 3 years later, or whatever, however long it's been, then you have the starts of the same level of effort to try to make that happen. So it's a variable that says maybe there's something there for the casual watcher. I would say it's like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe there's something there, right? But I think the bigger thing, which is exactly what you highlighted, can I make a quick funny comment on this? It's probably, but did you see that initial quality they posted this with? It was super terrible. Yeah. And I made a post and I'm like, I can't tell if it's Tesla bot or Joe Biden walking around.
Oh my God.
Difficult to tell. Anyway, terrible joke. I'm practicing my dad jokes. Okay. I'm going to be a dad soon.
Oh yeah. You got to get good at those now.
You got to give me a little bit of leeway here. But that right there. So that robot right there is using Tesla's full self-driving stack, basically. They're using a modified version of it where it's Hans Nelson. I don't know have you talked with Hans before?
Yeah, I know Hans.
You know Hans, right?
Yeah.
He calls this technology meat space GPT, right? Meat space GPT. It's like physical GPT, but that's exactly what Jason Huang and others are talking about, which is like now you're taking this AI technology and now you're moving it into the 3D space, and so the best way to think about it, I think, is you are offloading the coding work from a human to an artificial intelligence. And that's why this robot has been able to do this so quickly. It's because you have the marriage of that artificial intelligence brain with a talented team of engineers that are able to come up with the right actuators and the things for the robot to move around and allow the AI brain to dictate how the things moves around. And they've been able to do this with, again, with the lowest amount of data they have at their disposal and the lowest amount of compute hardware that they have at their disposal. So what happens, and this is where the NVIDIA story is so fascinating, right? So what happens in the next 10 years when you have, I don't know, 1,000x or 10,000x more compute power in H100 equivalents with 10x or 10,000x the amount of data for these types of solutions, right? And so the way to think about it is like, okay, so we've seen what happens in the world of GPT with ChatGPT and others, Midjourney, 11 Labs, where now you
only
have
getting better and better and better, these products.
And usable. I mean, I use an artificial intelligence voice of myself where people don't even know it's me to do my videos now with the technology today. And so if you have companies that are cracking the code for that in physical space, you don't think you're going to have a robot be able to fold clothes? You don't think you're going to be able to have a robot to, help you build a house or mow the lawn or move things from point A to point B, or do complex tasks over time that only humans can do. And that's that 50 trillion TAM number, which is anything that a human can do physically will be done by a robot at some point. 100%. It's just a matter of when. And then that raises a completely different question where I don't think we're anywhere close to solving, that's the one I'm scared about, which is a question of purpose and the question of what happens when you have a society that's addicted to social media now has all the time in the world to go on social media.
Right. And who pays for that? I mean, does the government subsidize a lot of the people that can't do anything else besides those hard labor jobs?
Exactly.
It's definitely a tough question, but as you said, I think the theme of this has been that you don't stop technology. So you don't think Wall Street has at all taken into account the potential of something like a bot for Tesla?
No. I think Wall Street has shown already that they need to see the number in the P&L before they start assigning a valuation to it. That's the market we're in today, right? I think maybe before, when interest rates were zero, you had Wall Street was more willing to give a valuation to companies that maybe haven't shown those numbers in their P&L yet, right? Yep. That's why you had these like very frothy valuations for Lucid, Rivian, and others. One can make the argument that Tesla's $1 trillion valuation maybe was a little frothy because of that, because you just have institutions that are willing to people and institutions that are willing to be more risky when it comes to where they're putting their money. But in this current market, they need to see it they need to see it in the bottom line. They need to see like a revenue or a gross profit line or a net margin line or a net profit line that has that number in there for them to be like, okay, cool. And that's why Nvidia has had to run its head. It's because they've been able to have a I mean, it's unbelievable what Nvidia has done. But what Nvidia has done is it talks to this exact point, which is they are able to capitalize on the insane amount of interest that's in this space now. And Chamath Palihapitiya talked about this at the last All In, which was such a brilliant point, is that the reason why they have 60-70% margins is because it's a function of how much interest there is in the space and the lack of supply for this type of compute. But the other interesting point that he made was that nobody has been able to truly make something incredibly groundbreaking with this hardware yet. Like ChatGPT is great, 11 Labs is great, but where is like the same level of breakthrough in our daily lives? And that is where I'm so freaking bullish on things like FSD and the bot, because those are the first iterations of the 100 to 10,000x game-changing nature of the technology, underpinned by the H100 in a way. Like the H100 enables Tesla to have FSD with the AI brain. It enables Tesla to have a bot that walks on its own by just looking at videos of people walking around. It's all enabled because of that, right? So it's to me, it feels like we're entering like industrial revolution, the advent of the internet, the Gutenberg press, the atomic bomb, right? Like
all combined.
All combined. It feels like that. And that's extremely subjective. But if you read history, it just feels like we're on the cusp of something weird.
Do you think there's any company outside of Tesla that is well positioned to capitalize on all of the different things you've talked about? Obviously, there's Nvidia, but yeah. Do you think there's anyone besides Tesla? You're all in on Tesla. I mean, from what I know of your portfolio. So like, you've made that bet. Do you think there's other people out there that are attacking as big of a problem as Tesla? I'm not going to say if there are or aren't. I'm not aware of any, and it's mainly because of the leader, right? It's just, I feel like are there like 99% Elons? I'm sure there's a 99, or there might even be a 110% Elon out there. I just don't know where that guy or gal is, right? I'm sure there's another player out there that's making something or making something happen that's maybe early stage.
But to me, like risk adjusted, Tesla for me is the most no-brainer investment that's in the market. It still continues to be. Now, I am bummed at like things like Palantir and Nvidia that I'm like, man, this is one of those times where maybe being all in is not the smartest thing in the world because you miss those runs. But at the same time, I've decided to put my effort into learning about this singular company because of just how game-changing the nature of that company is. But like Nvidia is extremely well positioned, you know? Hearing you talk about Palantir, you know, and the run it's had, clearly they have something going on there that makes a lot of sense, right? Especially in this market they've been able to explode the way they have. It's going to be fascinating to watch the markets, but I'm probably the wrong person to ask. Yeah.
All right, last question for you, then I'll get you out of here. Thank you, 451 people, for being here with us. Elon tweeted this at 1 a.m. last night. He said he's building a new car that can go 0 to 60 in less than a second. It's their new Roadster. And he also said that it is a collaboration with SpaceX. Yeah. And then someone asked, can it fly? And he gave an eye emoji, one of those, you know, type of thing. Yeah. So what the hell is he working on? I know you text him every day. Where's this Roadster in? What the heck are they going to unveil? And if they do unveil it, is it going to come out anytime soon?
So back in I think it was 2017 or 2018, where they first unveiled the original, the original second generation Roadster, not this new one. Elon talked about the SpaceX package before, and it sounds like maybe they've done some updates to the design, and they finally got it to a point where they're comfortable with the car, sort of getting pencils down, close to pencils down on the design, and I think it's just going to be a showcase of their technological prowess, but I think it speaks more to Tesla. I feel like they only would tackle the Roadster if they're comfortable with where they are with the rest of the company. And in my opinion, the rest of the company truly, if you think about where their growth comes from, is the compact car and FSD in the medium term, like in 2024, 2025. And Cybertruck to an extent, but Cybertruck for me is like more of a halo vehicle as well. I think Roadster and Cybertruck are Tesla's halo vehicles in the long term. But where does earnings come from? Where does impact to society come from? FSD, compact car, and the bot. And especially for a company like the compact car, where'd you go? You've disappeared into darkness. Oh, he's back. His camera ran out of battery.
It's overheated because you're spitting so much hot fire. So it's a dad joke. I'm telling you, you're gonna get good.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. You should be a dad. I think it's just a sign that compact car and FSD and bot are tracking well, and there is no sense for them to say anything about the compact car because
the $25,000 one, right?
The $25,000 car, because the second you announce that thing's going to have a 5 million unit backlog. So what they're probably going to do there is they're probably just going to release that thing and not tell anybody and be like, hey, just order this today and get it next week.
Right.
And then the internet will melt down. So yeah, Roadster's fun. It's going to be cool. It's going to kick ass. But it's more of a sign that the company is doing great. And they can focus on that while everything else is en route to be shipped.
I love it.
Yeah.
This was awesome, Farzad. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. Everybody always appreciates your comments. I appreciate them very deeply. And let's see how this Tesla story plays out. It's fun watching you as a creator document it. And you're the guy I go to get these updates. So I'm happy I was able to talk to you.
Well, I appreciate you for having me, man, on this inaugural lunch with Amit.
Lunch with Amit.
I'm full.
My lunch is
I feel great.
Chip. Here we go. That's
nice. I had a little omelet before I came on. But no, again, I love your work, man. You are freaking awesome. You are my go-to guy for Palantir, no doubt. And I highly recommend you follow, subscribe, and like to Amit because he truly does great work. And he's just a great dude. And you just have so much, dude, your future's so bright. You're freaking great. Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you, man. And I'm happy you're having a kid soon. It's going to be fun. You're going to be a dad. It's going to be cool.
Woo!
The dad
Sleeping who? Who needs sleep?
Sleeping who? Who needs sleep? Oh. I love it. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy Farzad's Twitter and YouTube in the description. We'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye, everybody.